The thing is, caves don't echo lies. I've been in enough of them to know that. You step inside, and it's like the world disappears. Just your breath, your boots on stone, and the sound of your own thoughts bouncing back at you. That week in Mammoth, I still can't tell if we saved a man or brought something back that didn't belong. My name's Elliot Warwick. I'm 58 now. Been retired a little over 10 years. I live in a small house near Bowling Green, Kentucky. Quiet place. Got some land, a porch that creaks, and a dog named Murphy who thinks he runs the world. My knees don't like stairs much anymore, and I take my coffee slower these days. But the brain, hell, the brain doesn't slow down. Not when it comes to the things that stuck. I served 25 years with the fire service, most of them specialized in search and rescue in natural environments, forests, cliffs, creeks, and caves. Especially caves. That was my beat. That's what I got good at. I was 28 when that call came in. Strong, lean, no gray yet. Back then, I felt like I could crawl into the earth and come back up the other side without breaking a sweat. Truth is, you need a certain type of person for cave rescue. Not just strong or brave, but someone who can stay real calm in tight places. Someone who doesn't mind the dark pressing up against your face for hours. Someone who can wait out silence without losing their mind. You ever been in a real cave? I'm not talking about the tourist trails with railings and little lights showing the way. I mean deep, earth-swallowed, lightless, ancient spaces. Caves where the air is wet and still, and the rock's been untouched since before people had names for things. You get in there, and it's like time just stops. I used to think I understood caves. Thought if I respected them, studied them, used the right gear and the right team, they'd show me what I needed to know. Let me find who needed finding. Most of the time, that worked. Most. But there was one time, one case, I still don't have answers for. Still turns over in my mind when it gets too quiet around here. Before I tell you about it, I should explain how things were back then. 1995. Different world. We didn't have all the tech and satellite gear we got now. We had radios, topo maps, a lot of rope, and each other. When someone went missing in the wild, we worked with what we had. And in Kentucky, Mammoth Cave was our crown jewel, and our biggest risk. Mammoth's the longest cave system in the world, and believe me, it feels like it. You could spend your whole life exploring it and still find new passageways. People underestimate that place. Think it's just a big hole in the ground with some bats. But that cave's alive in its own way. Shifts, breathes, keeps secrets. We trained out there a lot. Knew the land, knew the danger zones. Folks went missing from time to time. Hikers, amateur spelunkers, sometimes even experienced cavers who pushed too far. It wasn't always tragic. Sometimes they just got turned around and embarrassed. But sometimes, I'd seen death down there. Found people too late. Found folks who never should have gone in alone, or pushed past signs, or thought a flashlight was all they needed. And I'd seen miracles too. People hanging on by a thread, clinging to rock ledges, bone cold, but alive. But I never saw anything like what happened with that man. Anyway, like I said, I was still young. I'd been on maybe 4 or 5 big cave rescues by then. We had a solid team. Me, Riley, June, and my captain, Ben Trask. Ben was a hard ass, but he knew those tunnels like the back of his hand. I trusted him with my life more than once. We were out on rotation, doing maintenance drills near one of the restricted access points. It wasn't open to the public, too unstable. But we kept eyes on it in case someone ignored the rules. That week had been quiet. Weather was decent, no reports of missing persons, nothing unusual. I remember thinking it was almost boring. But boredom never lasts in our line of work. Looking back now, I remember a strange feeling in my gut even before the call came. Can't explain it. Just a tension, like the earth was holding its breath. You learn not to ignore those feelings when you spend time underground. That cave knows things before we do. I didn't talk about this story for a long time, not because I was told not to. No one told me to stay quiet. It's just that I didn't know how to tell it without sounding like I'd lost something up here. Taps Temple. Still don't. But retirement's got a way of stirring things up. You start going through the boxes in your head, trying to sort what's worth holding on to. And this one, this memory, it never left. Sometimes I wonder if it ever really ended. If we actually pulled that man out, or if we just walked into something we weren't supposed to understand. Like I said, caves don't echo lies, but they don't always tell you the truth either. Back in '95, we weren't a big team, just 6 of us dedicated to natural environment rescue, under the fire department's specialty unit. We were trained for cliffs, rivers, deep woods, but most of all, caves. Kentucky's full of them, and Mammoth Cave. That was the beast. If something went wrong underground, they called us. We weren't flashy, no fancy uniforms. Our gear was worn but reliable, helmets with halogen lamps, radios with batteries that barely made it through a long shift, ropes, carabiners, packs full of first aid, water, and backup lights. Everything had its place. You didn't cut corners down there. You don't get second chances when the rock gives way. I worked mostly with Riley and June back then. Riley was my age, wiry and smart as hell. Grew up around caves like I did, so we understood each other without much talk. June was newer, maybe 24 at the time. Tough as nails, never complained, not even when we had to crawl through cold, wet tunnels for hours. She had a calm that made you feel like nothing could go wrong. We needed that. Everyone had their role. Our captain, Ben Trask, ran a tight ship. He wasn't much for small talk, but he had instincts you couldn't teach. He could look at a map of the cave system, trace a path with his finger, and tell you which part might collapse next week. He'd been doing this longer than anyone. We all looked to him when things got weird. Our base was a trailer not far from the park's edge. Nothing fancy. Metal desks, radio tower, a fridge full of bad coffee and worse sandwiches, but it was home. We kept our packs there, ran drills, logged reports. Some nights we'd just sit outside after shift, drinking soda, boots off, watching the trees. Nobody talked much about the bad calls. You let the silence do the healing. Most of our rescues weren't dramatic. More often than not, it was some college kid who thought he could explore on his own and got turned around. Or families who didn't follow trail markers. Sometimes it was worse. Falls, broken bones, people lost for days. But we were trained for it. We practiced every week. Rope ascents, descents, tight space maneuvers, medical scenarios underground. We drilled in real caves, not just training courses. That was important. Nothing prepares you for a real cave except a real cave. We kept logs of every cave we entered. Temperature, air quality, known hazards, echo points. Echo points were places you could test your voice, see how far the sound bounced, get a sense of the chamber's size. They told you more than any blueprint. Thing is, Mammoth Cave, it shifts. It's a living system. Some days you hear water that wasn't there before. Other days a familiar path feels wrong somehow. There's a tension in the air, like something moved when you weren't looking. We respected that. Back then, we knew about the danger zones, parts of the cave where the rock was unstable or the oxygen levels dropped too low. Areas the park rangers didn't advertise. We had names for them: the Boneyard, the Shelf, Black Hollow. Not official names, just what we called them. Places that gave you that feeling behind your ribs. That slow, creeping tightness. One of those was a stretch near what we called Needle's Eye. Narrow tunnel that opened into a chamber with a sheer drop, about 30 feet. Not on any public trail. We found it during a training run. Real unstable, but beautiful in its way. The stone was smooth, almost polished. Air was always colder there. We logged it, marked it restricted, and moved on. That place would come back later. We just didn't know it yet. We also had a rhythm to our days. Morning check-ins, gear inspection, radio tests. Then we'd go out, sometimes to assist park rangers, sometimes to scout problem areas. And when we weren't in the field, we trained, or filled out paperwork, or waited. Waiting was a big part of the job. People think rescue's all action, but the truth is, you spend more time waiting than doing. Waiting for calls, waiting in dark tunnels for movement, waiting outside for news. That kind of waiting changes you. Teaches you to live inside your head. Not always a good thing. Still, we were close. You have to be. When someone's holding your rope as you descend into a black pit, you better damn well trust them. We joked a lot. Dark humor. The kind only people who've seen too much can laugh at. Riley once called us the only six fools who crawl into hell and call it Tuesday. He wasn't wrong. We didn't talk about fear. That wasn't part of the language, but it lived with us. You just learn to carry it quiet. You feel it when you clip into your harness, when your light flickers and you're 100 feet underground, when your glove brushes something that moves and shouldn't. You feel it, and you move anyway. That year had been mostly quiet. A few minor rescues, one serious injury in late spring, but no deaths. We started to think maybe 1995 would pass without heartbreak. And then the first call about the caver came in. They told us a man had gone missing 2 days earlier, 35, experienced by all accounts. Solo expedition, which we never recommend, but he'd logged his route, brought gear, was known to the rangers. The guy wasn't reckless, he just liked to go deep. We got the call because his trail ended near one of the restricted zones, close to Needle's Eye. We geared up, ran the standard procedure, spent days down there. Days, no trace, not a footprint, not a scrap of fabric, not a dropped pack or broken rope. Nothing. That's the part that stuck with us. That's when things started to feel off. And it only got stranger from there. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember that clear as day. I'd just poured myself a cup of that cheap powdered coffee we kept in the station. Riley was flipping through the logbook. June was in the back, checking harnesses. The kind of slow morning where you're half expecting a boring inspection run, or maybe helping a group of students find a lost trail marker. Then the phone rang. Not the park radio or the dispatch line. This was the old landline we barely used anymore. It was usually quiet, mostly park staff or internal calls. I picked it up out of habit, more than anything. Natural Rescue, Warwick speaking. There was a pause. Just a breath. Long enough that I almost said hello again. Then this voice comes through. Male. Calm. No panic. No background noise. Just measured. He says, "The man you're looking for. He's at Needle's Eye." I didn't say anything for a second. Just felt this weird heat rise up the back of my neck. I asked him to repeat it, and he did. Same tone, same words. "The man you're looking for. He's at Needle's Eye." I said, "Who is this?" "Nothing." "Do you have a name? Are you with him?" Silence. No click, no static. Just the line going dead like he'd never been there. I just stood there, phone still in hand, staring at nothing. Riley looked up from the logbook, saw something on my face and said, "What's wrong?" I told him, word for word. He didn't joke. Didn't make a face, just stood up, real slow, and said, "That's not funny, man." I said, "I'm not joking." Ben came in then, and I repeated it, told him everything. He didn't say anything for a minute. Just looked down at the table, tapped his finger a few times. Then he said, "Gear up." We didn't question him. We just moved. Now you gotta understand, we'd already searched Needle's Eye the week before. Thoroughly. That area had been marked, mapped, scanned. We'd spent 2 days in that sector, and nothing turned up. No sounds, no traces, just cold rock and silence. So to hear someone say, out of nowhere, that the missing man was there, it didn't make sense. And still, something about the call, the way he said it, like he wasn't guessing, like he knew. I thought maybe it was a prank. Somebody overheard something, trying to stir the pot. But why there? Why a restricted part of the cave that wasn't open to the public? We tried to trace the call. No record, no incoming number, nothing logged, like it came from nowhere. Park staff couldn't explain it. Said maybe a routing error, maybe someone patched through from another station. But nobody could find any evidence. Still, Ben trusted his gut. If there was a chance, we were going. We loaded up that same afternoon. Not a full team, just me, Ben, and June. Riley stayed to monitor the radio. We kept it tight, fast. The hike down was quiet. I remember the sound of our boots crunching over the dried leaves at the cave entrance. I remember the weight of my gear, heavier than usual, like my body already knew this was going to be different. June didn't talk much, but I caught her glancing at me a few times. She didn't say it, but I could tell she felt it too, that tension, like the cave was watching. We descended in through one of the old side paths. No lights, just our headlamps and muscle memory. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Air was still. No drafts, no echo. When we reached Needle's Eye, it was exactly as we left it. Narrow throat of rock, barely shoulder wide, that opened into a dark chamber. We'd marked it unsafe weeks ago. It wasn't a place you just stumbled into. You had to know where to go. We paused at the opening. Ben motioned for silence. Then we listened. Nothing. No breathing. No movement. Just the distant sound of a single water drop hitting stone. That sound echoed like a drumbeat in a cathedral. I went in first. June followed, Ben last. We crawled through, careful not to disturb loose rock. The chamber opened up around us. Same polished walls, same cold air. And then, June gasped. I turned my lamp to where she was pointing. He was there, lying on his side near the far wall, face pale, lips cracked, clothes torn but intact. His pack was underneath him like he'd landed hard, legs twisted awkward, unconscious but breathing. I froze. I'd been in that exact spot a week before. We checked it, marked it, left it behind after finding nothing. It wasn't like he was hidden in a crevice or buried under rocks. He was just there, in plain view. Ben moved fast, checked vitals. Pulse was weak but steady, no obvious fractures. He was alive. Alive. June radioed Riley. I pulled out the emergency blanket and started stabilizing him. Still couldn't believe what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to make it make sense. Maybe we missed him before. Maybe we overlooked that spot. But I knew that chamber. Knew every inch. He wasn't there before. And now he was. We prepped him for transport. Got him secured. It took hours to get him out. Slow crawl back through the shaft, then the haul up to the surface. The whole way, I kept waiting for him to wake up. Kept waiting for him to say something. But he didn't. Not a sound. By the time we reached daylight, it was near midnight. Paramedics took him from there. We gave our report. They logged it as a successful recovery, possible head trauma, memory loss, dehydration, but none of that explained how. We ran over our search records again, photos, logs, video footage from the week before, all confirmed. He hadn't been there. There was no sign of a body, no disturbance in the sediment, no dragging marks. It was like he'd been placed there. The phone call never traced back. No one came forward. And when the man finally woke up 3 days later at the hospital, he didn't remember a damn thing. Said he remembered slipping, his foot giving way near the edge of a pit. And then, nothing. Just darkness. I asked him what time it was when he fell. He said, Tuesday. I said, what Tuesday? He looked at me, real confused. Said, this Tuesday. He'd lost a whole week. And yet somehow, he was still exactly where we'd stopped looking days before. We got the call the previous Monday. Same guy. 35-year-old male, experienced caver. Name was Daniel Kerrigan. Lived in Louisville. According to park records, he'd checked in Friday morning and hadn't checked out. That wasn't too unusual on its own. People lose track of time down there. But by Sunday night, his rental car was still in the lot, and the ranger on duty got that gut feeling we all learned to trust. That's when we got pulled in. First step was simple. Get a hold of his route log. Cavers like Kerrigan usually file one before heading in. Helps us know where to start if things go sideways. His file showed a detailed path, starting from the east entry, past a known loop, then venturing into a semi-restricted zone bordering Needle's Eye. That last part wasn't exactly illegal, but it wasn't smart either. Ben gathered us around the map table and ran through the plan. We'd start early Tuesday. Riley and I would sweep from the northeast tunnel, while Ben and June would enter from the west end and converge at the loop. Cover both angles. Standard stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least on paper. We geared up, hit the trail before dawn. I remember that morning well. The light was soft, birds still quiet. Ground was damp from rain a day earlier. We moved fast but careful, always listening. First hour, nothing. Second hour, we found a food wrapper, same brand listed in his pack inventory. Good sign. Recent no moisture damage. We bagged it, logged the GPS. Third hour, we found scuff marks, boot prints, faint, near the rock edge. That's when the air shifted. It's hard to explain to someone who's never worked in caves, but you feel it, that shift, the way the cave seems to breathe differently. Like you just entered a room where something bad happened, even if no one says a word. It wasn't panic, it was pressure, a quiet kind that sat in the back of your skull. We pressed on. Every chamber we cleared, we marked. Chalk, tags, everything by the book. Still no signs of Kerrigan beyond that one spot. It didn't make sense. He was too experienced to vanish like that. By midday, June's team met up with us. We regrouped, did a full sweep of the Needle's Eye chamber. Took our time. Examined every ledge, every drop. Used the thermal cam, nothing. We even dropped a mic line into one of the vertical shafts to test for sound returns. Voice, movement, anything. Just static and echoes. No life. Ben looked pale. He didn't say much that night. Just stared at the topo map and tapped his pen over the chamber outline. We came back the next day, this time with dogs and another crew. Again, nothing. The chamber looked untouched, like no one had been there in weeks. No new signs, no debris, no broken gear, no fluids, no dropped flashlight, not even a glove. We canvassed surrounding tunnels, searched upstream and downstream, rechecked surface trails in case he'd exited and gotten disoriented. Still no sign. By Thursday, the mood had shifted. It's hard to describe, but when a search starts going that long without results, a weight settles over the team. You go from hopeful to methodical, from methodical to frustrated, from frustrated to resigned. I remember Riley sitting with his back against the rock wall on the third day, staring at nothing. He said, "It's like he never existed." I didn't answer. I just nodded. By Friday, we had to make a call. Park authorities wanted to extend the search another 2 days. Ben agreed, but with low expectations. I went home that night and sat on the porch for hours. Didn't talk to anyone, just stared into the trees and kept thinking about that chamber, that polished rock, that cold air. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just that we didn't find him. It was the way the cave felt like it had closed itself off. Saturday, we went back in with sonar. Still nothing. By Sunday afternoon, the official search was suspended, not called off, but moved to passive status. That meant the Rangers would keep an eye out, but we weren't expected to keep running active drills. We wrote our reports, logged evidence, tagged the case as unresolved, and that was it. We felt it hard. You don't walk away from someone down there and feel clean about it. We did our job. We followed every lead, but none of it added up. Ben called a quiet meeting Monday morning. He said we'd done what we could. Time to reset. None of us argued, but I saw the look on June's face. She wasn't okay. None of us were. And deep down, I felt something pulling at me, that we'd left something unfinished, that the cave hadn't told us the whole story. And then, the very next day, the phone rang. When we got back to Needle's Eye after that call, I wasn't thinking about rules or protocols. I wasn't thinking about how crazy it sounded. All I could think about was that voice on the phone, and the fact that, after everything, we were headed back to the same damn spot we had already cleared. We moved quiet, no chatter, no joking. Even June, who usually cracked some dry comment to keep us grounded, kept her eyes forward. We were already down deep, but it felt different this time. Like the cave was watching. I went in first. Like always. I've always been better with tight squeezes, and the tunnel into Needle's Eye was no joke. You can't rush through it. It's narrow, awkward, steep. The kind of passage where your gear scrapes the sides and you hear your own breathing louder than anything else. Once I cleared the neck of the tunnel, I stood in the chamber and just looked. He was there, just lying there on his side, like someone had laid him down gentle. Same clothes he was wearing when he went missing. Same boots. Backpack under him like he'd fallen and landed on it. Face pale, lips dry, breathing shallow but steady. I didn't move for a second. It wasn't shock. I don't know what it was. My brain just stalled. I had seen this chamber 5-6 times over the last week. I knew it had been empty. We'd cleared it top to bottom. We'd used lights, scanners, even lowered a camera into that side crevice just to be sure. He wasn't there before. But he was now. June came in next, then Ben. She gasped. I remember that. Just a little sound, barely audible, but sharp. Ben didn't say a word. He just moved in, knelt down beside the guy, started checking vitals. His name tag was still clipped to his belt. Daniel Kerrigan. His skin was cold, dehydrated. Weak pulse, but regular. Breathing slow. No external bleeding. We checked for spinal injuries. Didn't find any. His leg looked twisted, but not broken. His pupils responded to light, but he didn't wake up when we tried to rouse him. Ben leaned in close and whispered something. Can't remember what. Something soft, like trying to coax someone back across. I was crouched nearby, watching, thinking. We're not ready for this. Not in a panic way. Just not prepared for what this meant. Because this shouldn't be happening. We weren't rescuing a guy who got lost. We were facing something that didn't fit into any category we knew. We ran the usual checks, kept him stable, radioed up to Riley, told him we had a live one, unconscious male, moderate dehydration, suspected head trauma. Riley didn't say anything back for a few seconds. Then he said, "That's not possible." I just said, "I know." Getting Daniel out of there was a process. We had to secure him to the stretcher frame. Slow, careful movements. June wrapped his arm with a stabilizing sling. I adjusted his headlamp, which had somehow still been clipped to his shoulder strap. Battery dead. Ben took lid this time. I brought up the rear, watching Daniel's face the whole way. It was expressionless, calm, not in pain, not twitching, just like sleep, but deeper. I kept thinking he'd wake up in that tunnel, that he'd blink, look around, panic. But he didn't. Nothing changed. Not a single word. We reached the surface after midnight. Park rangers were waiting with the ambulance. Paramedics took over, loaded him in, started fluids right away. One of them asked what happened. I just shook my head and said, he was where we left him. I remember watching the ambulance drive off, red lights bouncing off the trees, and feeling hollow. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't happy. I was confused. And I hated that. I hated not being able to explain what we just lived through. My job was built on facts, coordinates, protocol, things that made sense. And nothing about this did. We went back to the trailer, sat in silence. Ben poured coffee none of us drank. June stared at the wall for a long time. Then she said, "How does a man disappear for a week and end up exactly where we already searched?" None of us answered. I checked our old logs later that night, looked through the images we took in Needle's Eye during the first sweep, compared rock patterns, shadows, wall formations. Everything matched, except the man. The space where we found him had been empty. It wasn't a blind spot. It wasn't a dark corner. He wasn't there. That part kept me up. Even worse, when I listened back to the radio calls from that day, there was no recording of the voice that tipped us off. The dispatcher system logs all incoming calls. And yet, nothing. The time slot was empty. No trace. I asked Riley if maybe it came through on a different line. He said, "Elliot, I didn't hear any other phone ring. You picked it up before any of us noticed." And still, I heard that voice. Clear as anything. "The man you're looking for. He's at Needle's Eye." Next day, we followed up with the hospital. Daniel was alive, stable. Not much else they could say. He didn't regain consciousness until 2 days later, and when he did, he had no memory of the time between his fall and waking up in the hospital. None. He said he remembered slipping, remembered stepping near a ledge, foot giving out. A sharp jolt, maybe hitting his head. Then, black. No memory of surviving down there. No memory of finding food, water, light, warmth. He should have died. After 7 days without water, underground, injured. You don't walk away from that. But he did. We asked if he'd had help, if maybe someone had found him and left him there. He said no. Said he didn't see anyone. We asked again. Same answer. He didn't seem scared, just confused. Calm even. Like none of it had really hit him. Ben didn't speak much after that. Riley tried to laugh it off a few times, saying maybe the guy just had a lucky break, but none of us bought it. Not really. That night I sat in my truck for a long time before driving home, just sat there in the dark, headlights off, thinking about that chamber, that smooth stone, that soundless space, thinking about how we search and search. And sometimes it's like the earth chooses when to give someone back. The first time Daniel looked me in the eye, it wasn't in that cave. It was 3 days later at the hospital. By then they'd cleaned him up, gotten some fluids in him, and ruled out any major damage. No concussion, just dehydration, mild exposure, some bruised ribs, and a dislocated shoulder that popped back in during the fall, or maybe during our extraction. Doctors were baffled, said he was lucky to be alive. I heard that word, lucky, more times than I could count that week. Didn't sit right then, still doesn't. They let me see him. I wasn't family, obviously, but the attending knew who I was, said maybe it'd help jog something. So I walked in. Small room, single window, machines beeping soft. Daniel was sitting up, staring at the wall like it owed him an answer. He looked thinner, gaunt, but his skin had color again, and he was awake. Alert, not groggy, just quiet. I walked in slow, stopped by the bed. He looked over at me. And that's when it happened. That moment. His eyes met mine, and I swear, I saw something. Not fear, not relief, something else, like he was trying to place me in a dream he couldn't quite remember. I said, "Hey, I'm Elliot Warwick. I was part of the team that brought you out." He didn't speak right away, just kept looking. Then he said, "You were there." Not a question, a statement. I nodded. "Yeah, you were unconscious when we found you, in a chamber we'd already searched." That part I left hanging. He swallowed hard, looked away for a second, then back at me. He said, "How long?" "You were missing for 7 days." He blinked. 7? I nodded. "We searched 4 of those days. Called it off on Sunday. Found you again Tuesday night." Daniel just sat with that, like the number itself didn't make sense. Then he looked back at me and said, "It felt like minutes." That's exactly how he said it. Not, "I only remember a little," or "it's all blurry." No, he said it felt like minutes, like time just stopped. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd heard of trauma causing memory loss, sure, people blocking things out, but this wasn't that. There was no fear in his voice, no panic, just confusion, like someone who went in for a nap and woke up in the wrong year. He asked where we found him, and I told him, Needle's Eye, same exact spot. He just stared at me. Then he said something that I'll never forget. I tried yelling. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He said, "After I slipped, I landed hard. I remember pain, but I was awake." I shouted for help, over and over. I heard echoes, thought someone might hear me. I stared at him. He continued. Then it got real quiet, like the cave swallowed the sound. And then, nothing. He paused. His eyes narrowed, like he was trying to pull something out from a fog. I think I fell asleep. But it didn't feel like sleep. It felt like waiting. That word stuck with me. Waiting. I asked him what he meant. He said, "I don't know." It was like I wasn't alone. But I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't move much. It felt warm for a while, then cold again, like the cave was thinking. I didn't know what to do with that. I'd heard all kinds of things in my career, hallucinations, fear responses, people seeing lights or hearing voices under stress. But Daniel wasn't shaking. He wasn't crying. He was calm, too calm. He asked me, "Did someone call you?" That made me pause. I said, "Why?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I just had a feeling." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "We got a call from someone. Told us exactly where to find you." He looked up, startled. "Who?" "I don't know." He leaned back, closed his eyes for a second, then said quietly, "I didn't want to die down there." That's when I saw the emotion crack through. Not fear, not sadness. Just the realization of how close it had been. That thin line between being remembered and being forgotten. Between breath and silence. He looked back at me and said, "I thought about my brother. About the time we went fishing and I lost his tackle box in the river. Thought about that for some reason. Stupid, right?" I shook my head. "No, that's not stupid." He smiled, just barely. I thought if I could get out, I'd call him, just say, "Hey," no reason, just, "Hey." That hit me harder than I expected, because in that moment I wasn't looking at a victim. I was looking at a man who'd brushed up against whatever comes next, and still didn't know how he came back. And I kept thinking about how we found him, how his body was placed, the lack of debris, the absence of animals or decay, like he'd been kept still, preserved. I stayed with him another 15 minutes. We didn't say much more. When I stood up to leave, he said one last thing. "Thanks for coming back." I looked at him and said, "We never stop looking." But even as I said it, part of me knew. We had stopped. The search had ended. And yet, we found him. Because someone, or something, wanted us to. I walked out of that room with my stomach twisted in a way I couldn't explain. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Something like, "You weren't meant to understand this." And maybe we weren't. That look in his eyes. I still see it sometimes. Not in dreams. Just when I close mine for too long. A kind of searching, like he's still waiting for the part that makes sense. And the truth is, so am I. You don't walk away from something like that and just file it under done. Most calls, even the hard ones, you carry a while. Then life pushes forward. You get another shift, another case, more noise to bury the old ones under. But not this. This one's stuck in a different way. At first, we tried to treat it like any other job. Paperwork. Debrief. We logged our findings, submitted the incident report, noted the inconsistencies. There were plenty. Dates didn't line up, evidence conflicted. The search map didn't match the recovery coordinates. But nobody wanted to push. Nobody wanted to say out loud what we were all thinking, so it got written up as delayed rescue following disorientation and fall, with the rest chalked up to trauma-related memory loss. I still have a copy of that report in my garage, buried in a file box. Never could bring myself to throw it out. After Daniel was released from the hospital, he went quiet. No interviews, no public statement. I heard he moved back in with his brother for a while. Took a leave from his job. He sent us a thank you note, handwritten, short, polite. That was it. I never saw him again. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Not for me. It started with little things. Not nightmares. Not exactly. Just flashes. I'd be driving, and a road curve would remind me of the tunnel bend into Needle's Eye. Or I'd hear water dripping somewhere in the house. And for a second, I'd be back in that chamber, flashlight in hand, trying to make sense of what shouldn't be there. I remember waking up one night thinking I'd heard that voice. The one from the phone. Not a scream, not a whisper. Just that calm, certain tone. The man you're looking for. He's at Needle's Eye. Like a recording stuck on loop somewhere in my memory. For a long time, I didn't talk to anyone about it, not even the team. But eventually, it came out. Riley and I were out at a diner one night, maybe a month after the incident. We'd just finished some basic trail inspections. Sat down for burgers and black coffee, and after a while he said, "You still think about it?" I knew exactly what he meant. I said, "Yeah, every damn day." He nodded, stared at his plate for a long time, then said, "I hear him sometimes." I didn't ask who, because I knew. We talked a little that night. Nothing dramatic, no conclusions. Just quiet acknowledgments that something happened to all of us in that cave. Something we weren't trained for. Something we couldn't explain away. Ben never spoke of it again, not once. He retired 5 years later and moved out west. Sent me a postcard once from Colorado. Just said, "Hope you're well. Take care of the dark places." I still don't know what he meant by that, but I think about it more than I should. June stayed in the service another decade. She and I worked a few more rescues together, but things were never quite the same. She had this way of pausing before entering a cave now, just a beat longer than she used to. I caught her doing it once, and she looked at me and said, "Gotta check what mood the Earth's in today." Didn't need to explain. I got it. Over time, life did what it does. Other calls came in. Other emergencies. But that one, it stayed separate. Like a knot you can't untangle but also can't cut. I stopped trying to explain it to people, not because I was afraid of sounding crazy, but because there was nothing to explain. We lived it. That was enough. But it left a scar. Not the kind you see. The kind that sits behind your ribs. The kind that shows up when you're alone in the house too long and everything goes quiet. It made me question things I thought were solid, like rules, time. The idea that everything has a cause and effect. We didn't cause Daniel to come back. We didn't even find him. He was placed back into our path, and I can't help but feel like we weren't meant to understand how or why. I think that's what haunts me most. Not fear, not guilt, but the unknown. The part of the world that doesn't fit in your report or your training manual. The part that reminds you you're not in control down there. You never were. You just think you are, until something proves otherwise. People sometimes ask what the hardest part of the job was. I used to say it was finding someone too late, or seeing a kid cry because their dad didn't make it out. But now, I think it's the calls you don't understand, the ones that sit in your bones, the ones that make you feel like maybe the world is bigger than you thought, and not always in a comforting way. I still go hiking now and then. Stick to the surface. I haven't been inside a cave since I retired. Not because I'm afraid, but because I don't think I'm needed there anymore. I gave that part of myself to the dark, and I got something back I never asked for. A memory I'll carry until the day I go quiet, too. You'd think after 30 years, a man would find a way to let go of things like this. But I haven't. Not because I haven't tried. I've done everything people say helps. I talked to a counselor for a while after I retired. Wrote things down. Burned old field notes. Hell, I even tried ignoring it. Thought maybe if I just kept moving forward, it'd stay where I left it, in that cave. But it didn't. It followed me home. Quiet. Patient. Like a question you forgot to answer, and now it's sitting in the corner of the room, waiting. I still hear things sometimes. Not voices, not noises exactly. Just sounds that take me back. A car door slamming like a rockfall. A faucet drip that echoes like it's coming from deep underground. The way the house creaks at night, and for a split second, I expect to smell damp stone or feel my helmet on my head. But it's not the cave itself that sticks with me. It's what we don't know about it. What happened in there. What it means that Daniel came back. Not how, not even why. Just the fact that he did, because he shouldn't have. There's no map that explains it. No timeline that makes sense. We searched every inch of that chamber. We said goodbye. We went home. And then a voice calls. And suddenly he's there again, like he never left. I've had a lot of time to think about it. Too much time, probably. I sit on my porch now, most mornings. Watch the woods. Listen to birds I don't bother naming anymore. And every now and then, I wonder if the ground beneath me is hiding more than I know. If something down there remembers all of us who passed through. People think caves are just holes in the ground, that they're empty, but they're not. They hold on to things, sound, smells, heat, and maybe memories too. Sometimes I wonder if part of me never came out of that chamber, if a piece of me stayed right there beside Daniel, waiting for something else to happen, waiting for that voice to come back. I've thought about that voice more times than I can count. Not just what it said, but how it said it. Calm, sure, not rushed. Like whoever it was knew we'd listen, knew we'd believe. And we did. I never found out who made that call. No one did. It wasn't logged, it wasn't traced, and no one ever claimed it. You'd think that would bother me more than it does. But what really gets me is the feeling I had after the call. That gut instinct, that cold certainty that we were supposed to go back, that we had to. I've never felt anything like that before. Not during a fire, not on a mountain, not even when we were pulling people from floods and counting seconds. That phone call didn't feel like a lead. It felt like a summons. And we answered it. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it changed me. Not in a big dramatic way, but in the kind of way that sticks in your wiring, makes you pause before you turn off a light, makes you check the lock twice, not because you're scared, but because you've seen what can happen when things don't follow the rules. I've got grandkids now, 2 boys, good kids, full of questions. One of them asked me last year if I ever got scared doing rescue work. I told him the truth. I said, yeah. Sometimes, but not when you'd expect. He asked me what the scariest thing was. I didn't talk about fire or cliffs or dead ends underground. I just said, not knowing. That's the scariest part. He didn't get it. He's young. He'll understand one day. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't want him to. Truth is, I don't talk about this story much. Not with my wife, not with old coworkers, not even with June, and she lived through it too. There's something about it that feels personal in a different way. Like it belongs to a part of me I don't access that often. But it's there. It shows up when I least expect it. Middle of a walk, watching the steam rise from a cup of coffee. That 1 second of silence before the TV kicks on. That's when I feel it, that tug in my chest reminding me that we were part of something bigger than a rescue. We were witnesses to something, and I don't know if that's a gift or a burden. There are days I wish we'd never gone back, that the call never came, that we'd just chalked it up as a loss and moved on like we were told to. But then I think about Daniel, alive, walking, talking, able to call his brother, hug his mom. He got another chance, and whether I understand it or not, we gave it to him, or something let us give it. That means something, even if I can't explain it. So yeah, it lives in me. That cave, that chamber. That week we lost him and found him again. It shaped the second half of my life more than the first 20 years of service ever did. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things aren't meant to make sense. Maybe they're just meant to be carried. Quietly, carefully. And when the silence gets too heavy, I sit on my porch, close my eyes, and say a small thank you to whoever made that call. Because they gave him back. And they reminded me that sometimes the job isn't just about what you bring out. It's about what stays with you after. I don't tell this story because I think it's going to make sense to anybody. Hell, it still doesn't make sense to me. Not in the way we were trained to process things. Not in the way we're supposed to write reports and file incident codes. It doesn't check boxes. It doesn't tie up neat. But I tell it now because it's been living in me for 30 years, and maybe some things are meant to be shared before we go. I'm not here to convince you of anything. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to agree with how we handled it. Maybe you think we missed something. Maybe you're telling yourself, there's got to be a logical explanation. That's fine. I used to say that too. But I've seen a man vanish and reappear in a place we already searched. I've heard a voice call in from nowhere and lead us to a life that should have been lost. I've stood in a chamber where time didn't work the way it should have, and I've lived with the memory ever since. So I'm not here to argue facts. I'm here to say there are things we don't understand, And they don't always show up in dramatic ways. Sometimes they look like silence, like a phone ringing when no one should be calling, like a face you recognize from a search you already gave up on. I used to think the world made sense if you worked hard enough at it, that there was a reason for everything, that you could dig your way down to the truth if you had the right tools. Now I'm not so sure. And I've made peace with that. This job, it teaches you humility real fast. You can be the strongest, smartest guy on the team and still lose someone because a rock shifted half an inch. You can follow every protocol and still miss the one sign that mattered. The ground doesn't care about your confidence. The dark doesn't care about your plans. But every once in a while, you get something back you didn't expect. A second chance. A whisper when you thought it was all over. A man alive in a place where there should have been a body. That call changed me. Not because of what we found, but because of what it said about the world, about the work we do, about how we show up, even when it doesn't make sense. If I hadn't picked up that phone, if I'd dismissed it as a prank, if we'd stayed home that night, he'd be gone. Simple as that. So maybe that's the lesson. Not that we're meant to understand everything, but that we're meant to respond, to show up. Even when it's confusing, even when it's late, even when we've already said goodbye. There's a lot of noise out there these days, a lot of opinions, a lot of people pretending they got the answers. But the truth's quieter than that. It shows up in a whisper, in a moment, in a voice that says just enough to get you moving again. If you're watching this, and you've been carrying something strange, something heavy, something that don't fit clean in a box, maybe a memory, maybe a question that won't let go, I hope you know you're not alone. We don't talk about this stuff enough. The stuff that stays with us, the things we saw that don't make sense on paper. I think we're scared to. Afraid it makes us look weak, or worse, crazy. But I'm telling you now, I lived it. I was there, and I'm still here, still breathing, still trying to make peace with it. So if you've got a story like that, something that's been following you, tugging at your sleeve all these years, I hope maybe hearing this gives you permission to let it out. Tell someone, write it down, speak it out loud, because sometimes the things that make the least sense are the ones that matter the most. And sometimes a man comes back from the dark, not because we did everything right, but because something out there decided he deserved one more chance. And we were lucky enough to be there when it happened. That's all. Thanks for listening.